and it seemed a good basis for a television series. And I wrote an outline and sent it to another company, and in the meantime sent it to David, and David said, let's do it. And we started writing the first one right away, I think.
You got the sack quite soon, I believe, from Simpsons.
I was fired, yes, for selling soft drinks in a fitting room.
Yes, and smoking too much.
And smoking too much behind the counter. It was rather tragic, the first transmission, really. It was because there'd been a terrible happening at the Olympic Games.
Munich or something, wasn't it? Yes.
Munich, and 26 million people were tuned in when there'd been an assassination.
And our show was put on sort of as a filler.
Somebody reached for any show and put something on television. It happened to be our show, so 26 or 30 million people were watching.
Which is an audience we would never get for ages,
No, we didn't get that.
That number of people saw it, and...
yeah.
For over a decade, the classic British sitcom Are You Being Served delighted audiences with its witty humor and unforgettable characters. But behind the laughter and iconic catchphrases, a series of events unfolded that ultimately led to the show's unexpected demise. From on-set blunders during the final episode to escalating tensions between stars, the beloved series faced numerous challenges in its later years. Tensions behind the scenes. Beneath the laughter and camaraderie that characterized Are You Being Served lay a simmering undercurrent of tension that threatened to boil over at any moment. At the heart of the discord was the two main stars of the show, Mollie Sugden and John Inman, whose on-screen chemistry belied a fierce rivalry behind the scenes. Sugden, who portrayed the formidable Mrs. Slocum, and Inman, who brought the flamboyant Mr. Humphreys to life, were both formidable talents in their own right. But as the series progressed and their characters became increasingly popular with audiences, a battle for supremacy began to emerge between the two actors. At first, the rivalry manifested itself in subtle ways. Sugden and Inman would vie for the attention of the writers, each hoping to secure the wittiest lines and most memorable moments in each episode. They would also engage in a silent competition to see who could elicit the most laughter from the studio audience. As time went on, the tension between the stars became more palpable. Both of them saw themselves as the true heart of the show and were unwilling to cede the spotlight to the other. Mollie's son, Robin Moore, shed light on the rivalry. Quote, "There was always that bit of professional rivalry, and there would always be this sort of vying between John Inman and my mother as to who would be top billing. I think they both sort of saw themselves as the star of the show." The rivalry came to a head during a stage show performance of Are You Being Served at the Winter Gardens in Blackpool. In a carefully orchestrated move, the show's producers had arranged for Sugden's name to appear in the top left position on the poster, traditionally reserved for the lead actor. But Inman's name was strategically placed slightly higher in the center, creating an optical illusion that suggested his billing was superior. The incident left Sugden fuming and only served to deepen the rift between the two stars. From that point on, their interactions on set became increasingly strained, with each actor retreating to their respective corners between takes. The once jovial atmosphere in the studio gave way to a palpable sense of unease, as the rest of the cast and crew found themselves navigating the treacherous waters of Sugden and Inman's feud. The ill-fated final episode. As the cast and crew of Are You Being Served gathered on set to film what would unknowingly be their final episode, a palpable sense of excitement and camaraderie filled the air. The beloved British sitcom, which had captivated audiences for over a decade with its witty innuendos, colorful characters, and satirical take on class and gender roles, was set to wrap up another successful series. Little did they know a series of unfortunate events would soon unfold, ultimately leading to the show's unexpected demise. The episode in question, titled The Pop Star, featured a guest appearance by a popular musician who visits Grace Brothers' department store. The script called for a grand finale where all the main characters, including the maintenance man Mr. Harmon, played by Arthur English, would come together for a lively musical number. But as the cameras started rolling, it became apparent something was amiss. In a shocking turn of events, Arthur English was nowhere to be found. The director, who had been preoccupied with setting up the intricate shot, had failed to notice the actor's absence. As the scene progressed, the other cast members began to exchange worried glances, trying their best to improvise and carry on with the performance. But without Mr. Harmon's presence, the carefully choreographed sequence fell apart, resulting in a series of awkward pauses and missteps. As the mistakes piled up, tensions on set rose. Camera assistant Nigel Saunders recalled the growing frustration. Quote, "Everything fell apart. The camera before me was blamed. We reset and we did it again. Mollie Sugden, Alfie Bass, and the men in the brown coats. It all fell apart again. And the camera after me got blamed. From a doorway, I saw Arthur English smiling. I'd missed him out, and that's why the whole thing fell apart." Frustration mounted as the director called for multiple retakes, each one seeming to fall short of capturing the intended magic. The usually jovial atmosphere turned sour as cast members grew increasingly irritated with the prolonged filming process. Whispers of discontent could be heard between takes, with some even questioning the decision to attempt such an elaborate scene in the first place. Finally, after hours of fraught attempts, the director reluctantly called it a day. The cast and crew, exhausted and deflated, slowly dispersed from set, unaware they had just filmed their final moments together. The BBC's surprising decision. As the dust settled on the final episode of Are You Being Served?, the cast and crew found themselves in a state of uncertainty. Despite the on-set blunders and behind-the-scenes tensions, many assumed the show would continue on, as it had for more than a decade. After all, the series still commanded a loyal following and consistently delivered solid ratings. But unbeknownst to those involved with the production, the wheels of change were already in motion at the BBC. Executives were engaged in heated discussions about the future of the beloved sitcom. Some argued the show had run its course, and it was time to make way for fresh, innovative programming. TV critic and longtime fan of the show, Nina Maisko, offered her perspective. Quote, "Are You Being Served was shelved. The BBC didn't want it. I could see that at the time they would be sort of wary of screening something that was really quite broad." Others pointed to the recent troubles on set as evidence that the series had lost its spark and was no longer worth the investment. As the debates raged on, a surprising decision began to take shape. Despite the fact that Are You Being Served still had a dedicated audience, the BBC chose to cancel the series after its 10th season. The news came as a shock to the cast and crew, many of whom had assumed they would be returning for another round of comedic misadventures at Grace Brothers department store. Theories abounded as to why the BBC had made such an unexpected move. Some speculated the on-set blunders during the final episode was the last straw, convincing executives the show had become too difficult to manage. Others pointed to the growing tensions between Mollie and John, suggesting that the BBC had grown weary of the constant behind-the-scenes drama. There were also whispers that the decision was part of a larger shift in the BBC's programming strategy. With the rise of alternative comedy and more socially conscious sitcoms, some believed the network was looking to distance itself from the more traditional innuendo-laden humor that had defined Are You Being Served? Whatever the reasons behind the cancellation, the news left a void in the hearts of the show's fans. For over a decade, Are You Being Served? Had been a constant presence on British television screens, a reliable source of laughter and escapism. The idea that it would no longer be a part of the cultural landscape was difficult for many to accept. In the years that followed, attempts were made to revive the spirit of the series. A spin-off called Grace and Favor aired in the early 90s, reuniting some of the original cast members. But without the full ensemble and the magic of the original series, the revival failed to capture the same spark. Now it's time to hear from you. What are your favorite Are You Being Served moments and characters? Let us know in the comments section below.